Good evening, everybody. It's Monday, March 18th, 2019. This is Owen Sound City Council. It's now 7 p.m. Council did meet. We had a closed session meeting starting at 6:30. During that closed session, Council reviewed the closed session minutes of Council meeting held on March 4th, 2019. Council reviewed one matter regarding personal matters about an identifiable individual respecting public appointments to the Downtown Improvement Area Board of Management and provided direction to staff. And Council reviewed one matter regarding advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege respecting a request for a conditional building permit from Georgian Landing, and no direction was taken. I note that Councillor Tamming is running late. He's been tied up at something, and he may get here or might not before we get to the end of the meeting. Additional business. Staff?
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a follow-up information on frivolous 911 calls.
Good. Councillor Dodd?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just announcing the next Young Professionals Network meeting.
Thank you. Others? Seeing none? Okay. Good. Disclosure of pecuniary interest, the general nature thereof. Councillor Gregg?
I have one on item 21C, bylaw number 2018-43, as it relates to a business I have ownership in.
Good. Others? Seeing none, thank you. Confirmation of council minutes, number 6.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Thomas, that the minutes of the regular council meeting held on March 4, 2019, as printed, be adopted.
All in favor? Oops, go ahead.
Just to have a comment on item C in the additional business. It says indicated a couple of calls to 911 in relation to the Amber Alert. That wasn't actually the inquiry. The Amber Alert was subsequent to the calls that I was questioning on our police board minutes the month prior. So I just wondered if just the wording of that should probably be clarified just for the record keeping, or just for the record. But just wasn't quite an accurate reflection.
So are we moving those minutes in, Ms. Bloomfield, with amendments? Okay. And the mover is okay with that, and the seconder is okay with that. So again, I'll call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. 6B.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Thomas, that the minutes of the closed session of the regular council meeting held on March 4, 2019, as printed, be adopted.
All in favor? Those are carried. Number 7.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Thomas, that City Council now move into Committee of the Whole to consider public meetings, deputations and presentations, public question period, matters arising from correspondence, reports of city staff, consent agenda, committee minutes, matters postponed, motions for which notice was previously given, and additional business.
And all in favor? And that is carried. So we're now in Committee of the Whole. Number 8, we have no public meetings. At number 9, we have a deputation from Mr. Robbins, an annual presentation. Welcome. So 6 minutes, correct?
That's working now?
That
6 minutes. Before we get started, though, Your Worship, through Your Worship, I just got a little bit of, information for everyone. Before we get started, you don't have me on the timer yet? Yes. I got 6 minutes? Yeah, 4.5. Oh. Your Worship, I was honored and privileged to be part of a hockey game last Tuesday against the Toronto Maple Leaf alumni. It's for the Canadian Mental Health and Addiction Association. And you and our MPP, Mr. Bill Crazy Legs, Mad Dog Walker, were on my line. And Coach O'Leary is right up there. I don't understand why you put them on my line, because every time I went down the ice, either they're falling, all right? But it was a great time, and I really like to thank you, Your Worship. You were one fantastic hockey player, all kidding aside.
No.
So, all right, so.
I figured you were going to get in trouble, and the two politicians were going to talk your way out of it. That was the plan.
Well, all I was trying to do is keep up with, there's a few players out there, Stu Doyle, Barry Christenbrink, they were good hockey players, I can tell you that right now.
Okay, you have 3 minutes left.
Okay, sorry. All right. My name is Jeffrey Robbins, owner of Veda Main Street Hair Salon, Owen Sound. And this is our 11th year for the Aveda O'Share Walk for Water. Now, the last 3 years out of those 11, O'Share has joined us. And in a couple of minutes, I'm going to have Colleen come up as well, and she's going to tell us a little bit about what O'Share does. The walk is on April 26th. It's the last Friday of April every year, so it's easy to put in your calendars. Councillor Kepke, Councillor O'Leary, Councillor Dodd, Councillor Thomas. These are people that have helped us out in the past, and I thank you very much. My request tonight is to get more, all right? Your worship, you have sponsored us very well. I appreciate that very much. But we would like to get more of the councillors. There's Councillor Hambley. Did I say that right? Hambley? We'd like to get you there to help out as well, all right? And Councillor Tamming has helped us. He's walked in the past. So that's one of the things that I'm going to request tonight, to get more of our councillors out. The other request I made is for us to take our photograph over at the market under the pavilion, but the lovely Mrs. Coulter said that they might be under construction. Shows she's maybe going to let us maybe be in front of City Hall, all right? So there could be about 100 people this year or more walking. So because Colleen from O'Share has got all these people together, so I'd like to thank Colleen as well. And there's our city manager. He could maybe walk with us as well. He can play golf, he can walk, all right? So, before we get started too much, as you can see on the board up here, that's where I want Colleen to come up now. If you could come up, Colleen. This is Colleen. She's from O'Share, and she's going to say a few words, okay?
Good evening. Thank you for having us. The Walk for Food and Water is our biggest fundraiser of the year at O'Share. O'Share is a soup kitchen located in downtown Owen Sound. Last year we served over 21,200 meals to people here in Owen Sound. We serve between 80 to 100 people a night over the course of a month. We have over 150 people from Owen Sound and area who volunteer to make our organization what it is. And so this walk really helps us to bring all of that together and to get enough resources to operate for the year. And so I would personally like to invite all of you to walk with us, just to raise awareness. There's lots of people who don't even realize that we have people who need help with food here in Owen Sound. And so to raise that awareness that there are those people who just need a little bit extra help, I think that that's really important. So I would like to invite you all to walk with us. Thank you.
Now, if you've got more to say, we're happy to listen to you for a little longer.
I am quite sure that Mr. Robbins has lots to say, so that's why I kept it short and put most of mine in written form for all of you, so that he could have more time. Sorry, one last thing. We had this amazing report done by Public Health. I can't believe I forgot, sorry, I get nervous. This report was done last year by Public Health, and they looked at our impact in the community, both on volunteers and on the guests. They did lots of interviewing with people and then came up with recommendations on how we can grow and serve our community better. So I have provided copies for all of you. If other people want copies, we have lots. It does just account for just the stats for O'Share and just some testimonials from people who use our services, but also from our volunteers who honestly would tell you that it's rewarding to be part of the O'Share community. And so please make sure if you get a chance to read that, that would be great.
So while you're here, how many volunteers do you have?
We have over 150 typically at any point in time.
And are you always looking for more volunteers?
Yes, because there's always times when people have to step back, or we have lots of snowbirds, so there's always opportunities. Our youngest volunteers are 6 and 7 years old, and then we have people in their 80s who still volunteer with us, which is fabulous.
And so what type of hours would you be looking at for volunteers to help? How do they contact you?
So they can contact us through our website, which is O'Share.ca, or our email, which is info@O'Share.ca. Makes it really easy. And most of our volunteers work from 4:30 until 6:30, Monday to Friday, helping to serve dinner. We also have a prep time from 2 till 4 where people can come help prepare dinner if that's easier for them.
Perfect. Has anyone else got any questions for Ms. Trask-Seaman, well, she's here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, she doesn't mean that she's going to sit down and not say anymore, all right? So I'm just going to say that, Your Worship, through Your Worship.
Okay, don't cut into her 10 minutes.
I'm not going to say that too much more, but what I would like to, if we could go to the video right now, if we could, before I say anything more. Could we go to the video? Will our friends at home be able to see this video too? Councillor O'Leary? Deputy Mayor? Okay, here we go now. Oh, I maybe get out of the way. Oh. This is not my time, is it? Like it's... Okay, here we go.
Our speech on Halloween is beautiful. We all work together as a community. It's my home. A place filled with the laughter of my brothers and sisters. This is my mother, Shifty. Her hands are made of the magic. When my mother was young, her mother passed on the tradition of weaving that spans generations of resourceful women. With each basket she weaves, she creates an opportunity for change. My mother walks many miles on a creek road to collect water every single day. The water that runs through our land is scarce and contaminated. Each jug of water can contain both life and death, a risk we have to take. My mother is made of determination, strength, and love. She supports our entire family with the palms of her hands. She deserves the right to clean water. With access to clean water, my mother can focus more time on her craft, and our community will prosper. Health and education for all will no longer be just a dream. With clean water, she can thrive as a family.
Welcome, everyone. Okay, this is our 10th annual Walk for Water and Walk for Food. So this is our second year, all right, with O'Share. And we're very happy. Tony's been a great addition. Her and her team have been fantastic to join us.
This was our biggest fundraiser last year. O'Share provides 5 nights a week a meal to people in need in our community. We have guests who are infants right up to seniors, and so this money helps greatly to provide meals for them. Last year we served over 20,000 meals here at Owen Sound, so this money helped us to do a lot of those meals. And so we are so thankful, so thank you to everyone here, and thank you to the fabulous businesses that support us, and thank you.
Okay, that's it then. Can we turn that off then? That was a beautiful video done by Richard Thomas, councillor. And if anyone needs anything done, that's the guy to go to, I can tell you that right now. He did the videography in the actual hair salon as well. So, you know, a few years ago, people asked me, a few friends of mine said, why do you do it? And I think you got this picture in your package, okay? This is the reason we do it, all right? It's to help out people that need our help throughout the world and in our community, all right? So last year, over $42,000 was raised for O'Share. About $25,700 was raised for Walk for Water, and we couldn't do it without the corporate sponsors that we have. Remember, it's not about, you know, maybe building houses or cutting hair. It's about helping people out, and that's our main goal, is we help the community and we help other people. Dr. Hazel Lynn, she's in our audience tonight. She's probably very familiar with that video. Her and Dr. Fred Veenstra are part of our walkers as well, and they've been supporters of us for a long time. Also, all the volunteers at OSHARE, all of my staff, everyone that helped us out, I'd like to thank them as well, because there's a lot of people to thank, and I can't mention them all. This year, Pizza Hut is going to give us our pizza for our after-walk celebration that we have, and we're going to have so many people that we might be at OSHARE. Mr. Jarrett Ron, sitting over to my right here, he does our imprint signs and all these beautiful signs that you see up front, as well as our banners and stuff. Thank you to them. So I guess, I haven't got much time left, but one thing that I'd like to look at, in the future for our walk, I read it in the paper this weekend. The First Nations, there's a couple reserves, First Nation reserves in Ontario and throughout Canada that might need our help as well. So I'm going to be working with Water Aid Canada to see if we can help those people as well. Because this money that we raise, 2016 we were top in Canada, 47,000 we raised. So those are the kind of things that we're going to look at. If people want to volunteer, like your worship said a few minutes ago, we'd be happy to have as many volunteers, as many walkers as we can get. And in closing, on May 2nd, 2018, we call Mr. Walker is our, what would we call him, your worship?
Minister Walker?
No, Minister Walker now, our MPP. He stood up in the legislature, okay, on May the 2nd, 2018, and you have this letter. I have it framed now, but it's what he said about our Walk for Water. And the closing words, Mr. Speaker, I'm very proud of my community efforts to address poverty needs, and I'd like to thank Jeff Berry and all the support for making a difference and making strides in our community and around the world. I also like to thank Colleen from OSHARE. She does a lot of work with this, and it's been great having her with us. So I think that I'm finished. Colleen, did you want to say a few words?
So,
Your worship?
So just to recap, your walk is Friday, April 26th at what time?
We will meet at the hair salon. We're going to try and meet at 3:30, or we will let everyone know, Colleen will let know people how many walkers, depending on how many walkers we have. We could be meeting in front of City Hall here or in your pavilion at the market.
So your hair salon is across the street on 8th
Across the
Street,
street.
across from,
Yeah.
or else in front of City Hall at 3:30.
3:30, and then
on
we do...
Friday, April 26th, and
Yeah.
if they want more information, they phone or contact.
Yeah, they can contact Colleen at OSHARE, or they can come right into our hair salon at Main Street, 519-371-6140. They can contact us there. For sponsor sheets, we have sponsor sheets for OSHARE, as well as we have sponsor sheets for the walk. And Madagascar, by the way, through your worship, Madagascar is again where the money is going to go this year. And I would like to change that in the next few years.
Good. Other questions? Councillor Dodd.
Thank you, Worship. Mr. Robbins, I know we sometimes give you a hard time for how long you speak, but I think it's appropriate that on behalf of all of council, we thank yourself, Colleen, and Mr. Cruselbrink for the work that you do. What you forgot to highlight in there was that since your first walk, you've done $270,000, as noted in Mr. Walker's letter, and I think that's absolutely amazing that the three of you have been able to put all your work together and be able to raise those funds. So no, every other member of council would feel the exact same way, that we're very grateful and thankful for the work that you do. So thank you.
Thank you very much. It's up to 340 now.
340, that's
Yeah,
amazing.
as of last year, so over 340,000 that we've raised.
Good. Others? Good. Thank you very much.
So that's it? That's all the time we get? Deputy Mayor, you don't want to say anything? Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next deputation comes from Barry Cruselbrink.
Thank you. I don't know how I'm going to match up to Mr. Robbins, but I just wonder if I get the clerk to hand these out to the council members.
Just so you know, Mr. Cruselbrink, there's no rules with you like with Jeff. You can speak as long as you wish.
Mr. Mayor, council members, thanks for your time tonight. I'm going to read a little bit more, and you can read along with me. I support Jeff, though, by the way, in the Walk for Water. It's a good cause, and O'Share, too, quite local, and they do a good work here, and thanks very much. Mayor, body, and council, thank you for the opportunity to provide feedback regarding the vacancy rebate program. This program has provided our business and others, local commercial property owners, with valuable relief that assists to offset a portion of the losses encountered when commercial units are not generating income. It's important to understand that the challenge of getting commercial spaces rented or keeping them occupied is a reflection of a surplus of commercial spaces in comparison to the demand. It's not due to a lack of effort or investment by the property owner. Greybush Property Owners Rental currently has 13 commercial spaces available for rent and 3 more that have recently given notice. This represents a vacancy rate of approximately 40% of our units, which is very high within this industry. This is compared to less than 1.5% for residential units. We have continually made significant investment to upgrade our buildings in Owen Sound core, while knowing the time frame to recover the costs would be lengthy. As many on council and city staff understand, this is done with a sense of community pride. To that point, we have donated several of our commercial units to local groups because we are unable to find paying tenants for years at a time. Unfortunately, with the chronic vacancies, the prohibitive commercial taxes and depressed lease prices due to high supply and low demand, it's been difficult to move ahead with additional projects. In reading the reports by the city's consultant, MTE, as well as some local comments, there's a misconception about the motive of landlords regarding vacant commercial units. MTE said that the committee discussion indicated that landlords might be more aggressive and perhaps even more accommodating in their efforts to fill vacancies if they were responsible for the full tax burden. Further, it was suggested at recent all-candidates meeting that 30% tax breakup was an incentive for landlords to leave units empty. Those remarks are not made by landowners who have invested in the community and fully understand that revenue from a leased unit is over 90% higher than the rental rebate. Excuse me. To put this in perspective, Greybush Property Rentals received rebates of $19,514.96 in 2017. The revenue generated would have exceeded $250,000 had these units been rented. The reality is vacancy rebates are the last option in a market with limited opportunities to rent empty units. The staff report dated December 13, 2018 suggests the principal argument against vacancy rebates is double dipping of some larger properties which cost the city on 2 fronts. It is suggested that some landowners are claiming rebates on vacant units in addition to adjusting their tax assessments to reflect vacancies. The example in the MTE report is that properties claiming over $8,000 in rebates had all adjusted their assessments based on vacancies. The properties claiming over $8,000 are the minority and likely include larger buildings outside the downtown core. On average, the rebate calculated for Greybush Rentals is less than $1,100 on our units, have not been adjusted to include reductions or double dipping. In the same staff report, 2 initiatives from the strategic planning identified, developed a coordinated approach to attract new investment and encourage economic development and maximize revenue sources and funding opportunities. Eliminating vacancy rebates only achieves the latter goal. Perhaps a path forward would be to work together to develop policies that recognize stakeholders on either side having legitimate concerns and difficulties. The proposed elimination of rebate program only addresses the concerns of the city, not those who own and struggle to rent the spaces. In the staff report before council this evening, staff is recommending the elimination of the program based on a survey that 90% of residents support the program. Unfortunately, a simple yes/no response does not do this valuable program justice or simplifies the concerns surrounding the vacant unit issue. It is important to resist looking at this program in isolation without looking at the bigger picture and the struggles of the commercial property owners in Owen Sound. Additionally, the report notes that in the event the rebate program is discontinued, there would be a savings of approximately $135,000 to the budget. This is unlikely as commercial property owners will have grounds to appeal their taxes assessments due to the additional expenses incurred, and the result will be a reduction in the tax assessment to the city. In order to allow staff to integrate feedback from stakeholders, a few suggestions have been identified to allow for some further discussion. Change the eligibility requirements to eliminate the double dipping. Refine submissions required to reduce the burden on administrative staff. Take more time to further investigate the chronic vacancy issue and work with invested community partners. Important one, modify the zoning bylaw to permit a greater residential presence in certain building downtown core areas. It appears that we are starting to see an evolution of property occupancy in Owen Sound with new tenants moving into the area and the revitalization of large existing buildings. It is exciting to see these new opportunities within the community and the spin-off investments starting to materialize from Bruce Power. This change may in fact be the start of reducing the amount of vacant unit rebates being provided by the city. In saying that, the downtown core continues to struggle and vacancy rates remain very high among small building owners. With limited prospects to fill the vacant commercial spaces, it does not seem like the time to make it even more challenging to be a downtown investor. Grey Bruce Property Rentals is appreciative of the vacancy rebate program and the assistance it has provided. This program continues to have value in Owen Sound and should not be discontinued just because other jurisdictions are. A made in Owen Sound approach continues to be the best path forward for the city and the local stakeholders who continue to invest in Owen Sound. There is merit in looking at alternatives to the standard municipal practice in Owen Sound due to the condition of the marketplace, as was done when reviewing development charges. The other comment that I'd like to make, Mr. Mayor, is that in your report, you mentioned it was done on a survey. The survey, basically, when you ask a bunch of residential, I don't think there's 159 people were asked in this highlighted, so 109 residential property owners responded. I mean, they really don't have an invested money issue, and they don't really understand, as far as I'm concerned, what's going on with commercial. The commercial taxes in Owen Sound, compared to other municipalities in the area, are almost, in some cases, 75% higher than what they are in other areas. Using same mill rates and that, with comparisons. So a suggestion is already the taxes are quite high, and that's why you see some commercial tenants moving out to the outskirts. And you know who they are. They're moving to the outskirts, and it has to do with taxes. So as far as that analysis of doing this on a survey, doesn't make any sense to me. Tenants are moving out. I mean, the city themselves, they rented a couple of spots. Take a look at the DIA. They're here now at City Hall. It seems to me that wherever the city of Owen Sound seems to be able to pick up some money they think they can pick up some money for some taxes or to help them, they're doing that. And to me, with the DIA and what they did with DIA and picked up some money there, was to me also the money's, as far as I'm concerned, is going to go to staff and different things. We're losing the volunteers. We're losing the what was always happening downtown Owen Sound. So council says that they're doing what they can to help. You know, I don't want to be negative, but it almost seems like what council's doing with the high taxes that are in town is helping commercial tenants move out of town. You've got the mall, you've got a problem at the mall, you've got a problem downtown. You can see it, and what it has to do more is Tenneco is closing, industries are closing. So the point of it all is we would rather see that those units rented. And when comments are made and candidates are running on, listen, we're going to collect this 30% or whatever it is, because people would rather leave their commercial units empty than have them rented, it doesn't make any sense. Yeah, I think that's about it. If any questions or what have you.
Questions, Councillor Dodd?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for doing your presentation, Barry. I also would like to say, extend my appreciation to your involvement in the Walk for Water. I gave that to Mr. Robbins, so I wanted to extend that to you as well while we're speaking. I guess one of the things, there was a recent program that was initiated through the Economic Development Committee to do something about the beautification of vacant storefronts. We did that on behalf of the committee on the recommendation from the general public that beautification of the downtown is essential. There's a lot of vacant storefronts that are in the downtown core, as you're aware, and some of them look pretty shabby. We had one positive response that came back being wanted to work in coordination with the Economic Development Committee to putting in some new optimistic posters within the vacant storefront. So I'm just wondering, those were the things that I had mentioned in when I did my when I was running for my councillor seat, and I'm sure you were there to hear it. And I was talking about the Renew Meaford, and they do initiatives that way. They do pop-up shops. Would those be the things that you would ever consider of doing? Those are I know you're a building owner in the downtown core. But those are initiatives that we've been trying to push to help beautify our downtown, and we've had zero responses basically to work with us on that. So I'm just wondering, hearing your perspective, is that something that you'd ever be interested in? Obviously, when you compare the commercial taxes between us and our surrounding municipalities, we offer a lot more services than our surrounding municipalities, so I don't think it's a fair comparison. But anyways, I would just like to hear your perspective on something that what they've done in Meaford, what they did in New Tecumseh, when we're New Meaford, New Tecumseh had pop-up shops. So I'd just be interested to hear what your perspective on that would be.
Thanks, Councillor Dodd. As far as your thing goes on taxes in other areas, like these other commercial areas where the taxes are so much lower, downtowns are full. So they could charge more taxes if they wanted to. Having said that, I remember what you said at the All Candidates meeting, and I think it's a great idea. But you realize what we do is always, I mean, the front doesn't look very good in a lot of cases, but we actually redo the building according to how the tenant wants it. We offer free rent if that's the case for a period of time. We offer to do the renovations, which we do most of the time, make the building totally safe, and basically redo it so it's efficient, so the tenant can afford the utilities if we're not paying them. So we do whatever. And it takes a long, long time to get that money back. But if you think it'll help to put some pictures or some posters on the windows that need to be actually probably replaced, or the front to be redone, I mean, that could be done. I think it's a great idea.
I'm not talking about tenant improvements. I understand that you do a great job when you have tenant improvements, when you have new businesses taking over your spacing. We're talking about that middle ground when you have not just yourself, but there's a building owner that has an existing vacant spacing or space that's been vacant for a long period of time. We recognize that that's an eyesore, not only just for the perspective of the building owner, but from the city's perspective as well. We want to highlight the beautification of the downtown. So that's what we were looking for. And I think if you are interested in doing something that with some of your vacant buildings, I know we have just passed that through economic development at our last council meeting. And I know Ms. Coulter would love to work in partnership with you about seeing what we could do to beautify some of your stores while they're in a vacancy period, not when you're having occupancy.
She has, Pam Coulter has actually mentioned that to me, and I think it's a good idea. And if you take a look at my rental units, there may be one or two or three that are, I would say, maybe an eyesore. The rest of the 13, 10, 12, 13 are actually buildings that have been all redone and refinished. So there may be one, two, or three Councillor Dodd, that's all you see. If it's, and what I do when I do a tenant lease whole uphold, I replace the whole front, we do the whole front, everything new. You know what I mean? Which I don't have to do, but it's for a long-term thing for the tenant.
For sure, and I didn't want to say that any of your units you're lacking in appearance or any way. I'm just saying,
I understand.
that's something what we were trying to do as an overall general of the downtown core, so thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Merton?
Thank you for your presentation. Just a couple of questions for your worship. Over the past 5 years, over $500,000 has gone towards supporting this program, and that comes from the general tax levy. So all of the citizens of Owen Sound together are supporting this program. So it's certainly important to recognize that the city itself is more than just us here, but those taxpayers. So at the beginning of your presentation, you had commented that at the moment you have about 40% of your units that are vacant. What are you anticipating might be the impact with the 10th Street renovation on your abilities or potential to rent units?
There definitely would be an impact, I would say, but the busier that the economy is, it will be helpful. People will find the place. Some of these places that I have empty now are offices or something within a building that were offices at one time that have moved elsewhere. And a lot of people have gone back home to do that work with computers and all that now and then. But I would say that the impact of replacing the bridge, and it will have an impact on everybody downtown. It definitely will. But, I mean, we have to get through it, and that's an important step for council to get that bridge redone, and we just have to grin and bear it and carry on.
Through your worship. So if I understand correctly, and we've just seen this report tonight, what you're really asking is a reconsideration of some of the conclusions presented in the report and the opportunity for the city to work closer with commercial and vacant property owners before a decision is made. Am I accurate?
Definitely. I would like to, even one important thing would be is expecting more residential. If those units that were commercial were all residential, they would be full. Now, I'm not so sure that, I mean, Councillor Tamming isn't here tonight, and I heard what he said at all candidates meeting, but I'm not so sure that you'd want to have a residential unit right onto the main street. I would, but what's behind it, I mean, could be residential and it would be full. Carney's Lane, for instance, there's a whole big section there that's vacant, and we've allowed other people to use that, the hospice and different places to use those for the years because it had been vacant. We hadn't pushed it. So those units are all in good shape, but they are vacant. And those are some of the ones that we got the taxes back on, or a lower rate. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's Councillor Craig.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here tonight, Barry. A couple of years ago, I know you had the fortitude to come to a public meeting, and you got chastised pretty good for a lot of things that I thought were quite unfair going your way, and that was a meeting about troubles and vandalism and so forth in our downtown, and there's various groups together, and I thought you took her in the chin quite unfairly that night. So thanks for being here again tonight and putting yourself out. I think this is good information you put forward here tonight. I've got a couple questions for you. You've done quite a bit of very good work. I mean, your investment in the downtown, I think, stands heads and shoulders above a lot of other building owners. And I think it's very easy to tell. I mean, very easy to witness a lot of the properties you have and the amount of money that's went into them. You've got a couple comments, and one, I'm wondering if you can expand on me here. Additionally, the report notes that in the event the rebate program is discontinued, there would be a savings of approximately $135,000 to the budget. This is unlikely, as commercial property owners will have grounds to appeal their tax assessments due to the additional expenses incurred. What are the additional expenses that would be incurred?
Well, I would say, like, even in my own buildings, I could ask, I'm not double dipping, but I could ask for the taxes to be reduced because of upkeep of this building and it being vacant. So there's still upkeep, and you have to carry the cost of having that building there, paying taxes. So there's going to be, the value will be lower, and that's why the tax assessment, I've never had them assessed to get them lower. I've always left them exactly where they were.
Okay, thanks, because I know MPAC uses 3 methods of calculating assessment, one of which is the direct income approach.
Yep.
And I think largely that's what we're speaking about here tonight, is the ability of that property to earn income, and that's how your assessment is then derived. We've got a few things that matter to our downtown. We've had a lot of professionals leave the downtown, whether they're engineers or doctors or medical field. Those decisions over 15 years matter, and online purchases matter. I'm quite certain that Amazon will not be making a donation to Mr. Robbins' event nor any other event in Owen Sound. And the more that people purchase from Mr. Bezos, then his wallet gets fatter and the community continues to shrink. When it comes to taxes, I'm going to speak on that later because I'm in complete agreement with you. Our commercial rates are too high, and one thing that we minutely lowered last year was the commercial rate, and I hope that we continue to do this again next year until we can get to where we ultimately have to be, which is at the county rate, which is a 1.31, and right now we're at 1.88. So I hope council can continue to, I'm going to speak later, control spending, budget increases, and ultimately continue to lessen that commercial tax ratio and get closer to the county, because that's what's going to also assist you.
And if I may, through your worship, is, like for instance, you take example, the alleyway by Casero and beside Milkmaid. Like those 2 buildings were totally refurbished and redone. Something that, there won't be a payback there for 25 years. So, it's something that enhances the city. Actually, the one tenant, Milkmaid, has already changed hands since then. And unfortunately, we got somebody else in there who was good to keep it going. So at the time, we went ahead, we had a tenant, and we made it actually a little bit better than they wanted, so that was the time to do it, and do it once and do it right. So the payback on all that stuff for us is a long time. Thank you.
Councillor Kepke?
Just a couple comments. First of all, thank you so much for your generosity in providing buildings to people and non-profits or not-for-profits, such as Community Foundation Grey Bruce, who are in Carneys Lane. I know that they wouldn't have the nice space they have if it wasn't for you, and as well the hospice when that was going. And I just wondered if council did decide to go with a vacancy rebate program, I'm sure it would assist if we could do a phase-in of that as opposed to going the whole program all at once, because I noticed some other places have done that. They've done a phase-in of the process.
Yeah, if you want...
Phase out, I'm sorry.
Sorry,
Yeah.
if you want my comment on that, I think for the amount that you're doing here for the commercial downtown compared to maybe what's happening in the bigger industry, I think it's minimal for council. And if they could even make it so much for the downtown area versus out of town or on the outskirts of town, the bigger industries where the double dipping and stuff's going on, that would maybe make sense. But as far as what's happening here downtown, I think to keep the downtown going and viable, I think a couple of things, and one is maybe exempt them, and number 2, my biggest thing would be is to allow more residential on the main level, and maybe not necessarily to the street itself, but that would be helpful too.
Yeah, that was one idea that I liked that you suggested as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor O'Leary.
Thank you, Worship. I have a whole page here on a Barry Russell Brink file. I stopped at one page. I could go further, but I kind of shortened it. I'm going to start with, first of all, you stand to lose $20,000 if we eliminate this rebate, correct?
Well, that's the amount that was...
That's what it was in
last year.
2017.
Yes, sir.
So here are the points I've made. You're the biggest developer in Owen Sound, and you're respected as such. The first couple of points here are all the things that you don't want me to say. You're the most generous guy that I know. You'll probably raise $25,000 to $30,000 for a walk for food and water by yourself. 1 week ago tomorrow, the mental health was the recipient of more than $30,000 because of you. And that doesn't even touch the surface. But here are the points I want to make, and I'm going to try not to be negative too. Since council decided on the development charges holiday, you've had in excess of 50 building permits for single-family dwellings. With the DC holiday, you saved $250,000 at $5,000 a house, or $500,000 at $10,000 a house. Now, you and I have had these conversations before. The development holiday, you pass those savings on to the customer. So if I'm building a house and you don't have to pay development charges, you don't charge me. That's your decision. So if you want to pass it on to the buyer of the house, that's fine. If you want to keep it, if you want to keep half, if you want to keep 20,000, that's your business, that's your decision. But this is what I want you to understand. When we made the development charge holiday, we didn't make that decision so you could save $500,000. We made that decision because we wanted to spark some growth in the city, and I think that started. And it shows in the numbers that the buildings are coming, and we are starting to show some growth. That's why we did it. We did it for the taxpayers, to try and get more tax money coming in. It's the same with the rebate. We're not talking about eliminating the rebate so that you can lose $20,000. We're doing it to get the $135,000 that we're going to get in tax money when the rebate goes through. So that's what I want you to understand. And I totally agree with you. I think it's a hoax when people say that property owners are hoping their buildings are empty and so that they can get the rebate, because obviously you make more money when they're being rented than not. Yeah. Okay, with that said, I appreciate your presentation. Thank you.
So can I respond to that? Mr. Mayor, through you?
Love to know what you're going to say first. Go ahead.
Well, what do development charges, number one, have to do with this rebate? That's one question I would have. What are you bringing development charges into this for?
Well, I'm connecting the dots.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you win and sometimes you lose.
I didn't win. Let's see who the winner is. And you can answer this question. When I built you a house, did I charge you a development charge?
I would have no idea.
You have an idea? Did you get another price? Was it competitive?
Who would that be?
I'm not
Like,
sure.
don't get me going on that.
There's other builders around.
We're a little off track.
So just a minute though, if I may. You actually saved the development charge. I have houses, when I took 50 permits out, these are speculative houses. So I invested 50, if you want to go 50 times 300,000, what's that add up to? That's what I invested in this town, is an industry.
Right.
Okay, so I invested that.
Yeah.
So, and I tried to make a sale. I can't just put any price I want on the house. I have to get what I can get. And how many are still there vacant? Take a look at, thank you very much, Council, for extending my development charge for the 17th Street East one, which you actually extended. And I'm glad you extended because we ran into some problems over there with deeds and this and that, but still those units haven't sold. The economy here, as much as you want to make it look, however you want to make it look like, is difficult. We're selling to seniors and some young people, and young people are having a difficult time. So as far as these development charges go, don't make out that Barry Crystalbrink and Barry's Construction, which is not Grey Bruce Reynolds, has made that money because it's been passed on to them. And I'd gladly show you the books however you want to see them, however you want to prove it. I'm competitive, and I do what I got it, and those development charges were passed on. And what I did for the city at that time was what they asked me to do. I said, if the development charges are waived, it's a spark where I'll take out, I said maybe 20 permits the first year, which I did. Take them out and speculate. And I still have some of those houses today that haven't sold that I've rented instead to a doctor that's coming from town, or this happening or that happening. And I have 5, 6, 7 houses up in Woodland yet where are empty spec houses, speculating. So, to get into the question where, and you make a statement that I've made $500,000 or what I've made on development charges, absolutely not.
But I did say that's your decision.
We're going to move on. We're going to move on. Mr. Crystalbrink, I've got one question for you that you can help me out with, and it actually comes from a different letter, not from the one that you just provided, and it keys off of what Councillor Gregg just said. Assessment values, what was the example you gave?
Direct income.
Direct income. Commercial properties, clearly residential properties is based on fair market value. What will somebody pay for it? Commercial is technically based on what will somebody pay for it. But it's a unique buyer in a sense. It's not everybody that, everyone's going to hopefully be able to buy a house. Not everyone buys commercial. I know from experience watching you, everything is through a calculator before you make up your mind on anything. How do you value commercial property if you're going to buy it or sell it?
What I think the income may be, where it is.
I'll get you to push your button because I pushed them to shut them off there. There we go. Thank you.
Sorry, what I think the income may be, totally buying commercial has to do with direct income approach, is what it has to do with. Because that's how you would get your appraisal. And if the appraisal, you have income approach and what they've sold for and what the cost to reconstruct it would be. They'll finance you on what the income approach is. So I would buy it depending on the shape of it. So the less I can get that income property for, the better, because it usually needs a lot of work. And a lot of work involves getting a tenant in it, but fixing it up so that they can afford utilities. Making it safe, taking the knob and tube wire out, take the asbestos out, making it safe, because there's a lot of buildings downtown that have so much asbestos in them, that have no insulation in them, and they need that work and the roof work, and to make it safe for the fire department. Early access and early warning. So what decides me and what I pay for it, whatever I can get it for at the time, unless it's already occupied and I can go by the income statement.
So if it's occupied, you go by the income statement. Most of your commercial buildings downtown will have apartments upstairs.
Yes, sir.
Provides an income.
Yes.
Does that make a difference in renting the main floor or applying for a commercial tax rebate when you've got income coming in upstairs?
Yes. Makes a difference, yes. It all has to be in the calculation when we submit it.
Good. Okay, that helps. Thank you very much for your presentation. Also, with everyone else, Councillor or Deputy Mayor O'Leary says, there's times that you're a pain in the for staff and council because you're always pushing us, and certainly every businessman wants to make a profit. At the same time, the work that you have done, mental health, I know how much work you and your staff put into selling tickets, getting people there last week, some sponsorships, some phone calls, some stuff that you put together, and I don't think you get recognized enough in the community for the things you do. And so congratulations and thanks for those things, even though sometimes you challenge us.
It's worthwhile, it's for the community, and we all work together to make it a better place.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time.
So I think next, we have no correspondence. Oh, public question period. I almost skipped past that. Mr. Reid, welcome.
Hi. I'd just like to touch on something Mr. Cresselbrink said there. The shortage of residential units, especially in the downtown area, and the shortage of accessible units. Could maybe the conversion of some of these ground floor units be made into accessible residential units and solve two problems?
Good point. It's something that has to be reviewed in the official plan when we get there in the next year or so. Go ahead.
I would just ask our Director of Community Services to comment on that, because we have actually had some discussions about projects running in other communities where storefronts are allowed to be converted to residential use, and maybe you could just comment on that, Pam.
Certainly, through your worship, there is a special provision in the downtown commercial area where generally the main floors are commercial and up above are the residential units. There is a provision in our zoning bylaw currently that allows 45% of that gross floor area on the main floor to be residential, with the remainder being commercial. So, right now, some residential is permitted on that main floor. The entrance to the commercial and residential need to be separated. But that certainly, you know, if we were wanting to increase the amount of residential on the main floor, it's certainly something we could look further at with council, but it is permitted right now at 45%.
So that's 45% per unit. Okay. Okay, good, thank you. Correspondence received, we have none. Reports, Ms. Allen. Go ahead.
Worship, I wonder if I could ask to have 12B moved forward. I think it's going to take a lot less time than 12A, and then we won't be holding these folks up.
Okay. Council okay with that? Seeing nodding of heads, so we're going with 12B, which is, I think, Ms. Coulter presenting on that.
Thank you, Worship, and I would like to recognize Ms. Melissa King with Peter McCallum and Giorgio. Giorgio, I won't say your last name because I won't get it right, the developer for Georgian Landing. Heidery, yeah, okay. So the subject property is located just south of the Bayshore Community Center with frontage on 2nd Avenue East, 3rd Avenue East, as well as 8th Street. It's sort of a P-shaped property. The proposed redevelopment includes a 39-unit, 6-story residential apartment building. So this council had approved the site plan back in November with certain conditions. At that time, the report that you considered addressed the Environmental Protection Act, the provincial policy statement, and the city's official plan. And in short, where there's a change of use from a commercial or industrial use to a more sensitive use, in this case residential, there's a requirement for a record of site condition. The conditions of site plan approval imposed by council did allow a building permit once a record of site condition was filed with the ministry for this property. The developer has now requested that the city consider an alternative approach using a conditional building permit that would allow a conditional building permit to be issued and the development to proceed. The Building Code Act requires compliance with applicable law and for the issuance of a building permit. And for a full building permit, compliance with the Environmental Protection Act is required. The Act also provides for conditional building permits where specific laws are complied with, and in that case, the filing of a record of site condition is not required. When we received the letter and the request from the developer, staff researched what other municipalities do and did also seek legal advice. Ms. Melissa King, a qualified person under the Environmental Protection Act, and who's with Peter McCallum, who's overseeing the really science part of the cleanup of this site, has provided information regarding the Phase 1, the Phase 2, as well as the Phase 2 supplemental environmental site assessments that have been completed, as well as information with respect to the water sampling. So what we know, the soils have been tested, they're clean, they meet the residential standards. 2 or 3 monitoring wells have been installed, and while the ministry would say you can't take samples in the first 90 days after the soils are clean, the preliminary samples show that the water from those test wells is meeting the residential requirement. The ministry would also say that the first water sample could be mid-April, with the next one then in mid-July, which means the record of site condition wouldn't be filed until the fall. So the developer is anxious to proceed. Council is asked to consider the request. There is a draft agreement attached to the report that provides indemnification and security to restore the property, followed by a full building permit. No residential occupancy would be permitted as per the conditional permit prior to the record of site condition being filed. The security is in the amount of $100,000, and Mr. Heidery has signed the agreement and returned it to the city. So with that, Your Worship, the recommendation is that council would authorize an amendment to the conditions of site plan approval to permit the conditional building permit, and that you would approve a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute the conditional building permit agreement.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor O'Leary, you had your hand up, I think.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to read one paragraph under the Ontario Building Code. Any development of the lands in advance of an acknowledged Record of site condition would be at the sole risk of the owner. A condition of site plan approval is recommended that would provide the opportunity for the chief building official to issue a conditional permit at their sole discretion if the owner acknowledges and agrees that any expenditure of funds is at their own risk, and should a record of site condition in compliance with the Environmental Protection Act not be achieved, no residential occupancy would be permitted. So I just wanted to say that this was one of the examples of our staff maybe going out of their way a little bit to help a developer. Yes, the risk is on the developer, but staff are going out of their way to keep the project on the move. It's important to note that. And with that, I would move the recommendation, and also like to thank Giorgio for coming tonight.
Other comments? Go ahead.
So my understanding, if this motion is approved, that this will set a precedent by approving this?
Through your worship, I think in speaking with the chief building official in Hamilton, and also in speaking with Melissa King, who's here this evening, who, you know, as I mentioned, is really doing the science of the cleanup. I think it's important to note that in each instant where there's a request like this, what Hamilton has told us is that you would evaluate the specific conditions with respect to the development on their own merit. So I think in this case, the fact that the soils have been removed, that the site is now testing clean is a really important factor. I think the preliminary water samples are very positive. I think that, you know, there's a way to, you know, even if the water comes back in 90 days and there's something different, there's a way to address that going forward. So I think it's important that each of these would be considered on its own merit going forward.
So, sorry, you're drawing a distinction with the word precedent, which would suggest that we must follow this going forward. So it wouldn't necessarily be a precedent. However, it's the first time we've done it. We've perhaps old dogs have learned a new trick from Hamilton and other places that works that we could use in the future in certain circumstances, depending on what the opportunity is.
Thank you for that, yes.
Yeah, good. Others? Call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Thanks, Pam. So now we go back to 12A. Ms. Allen, your report.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a quick presentation just to walk through sort of the process we've followed to date to get to where we are tonight, as well as the survey results. So the vacant unit rebate came into play in 2001 when we underwent property tax reform. Commercial and industrial properties have returned on the assessment roll and taxed each year at their fully occupied assessment value, regardless of whether they are vacant parts of the building or not. Property tax relief for vacant commercial and industrial units is provided through the vacancy rebate administered by the municipalities. And this rebate program is mandatory and governed by Section 364 of the Act of Ontario. Commercial and industrial property owners who are eligible for the rebate must submit an application to their local municipality for each year that a building or a portion of the building is vacant. So we have to receive that application annually. It doesn't stand until otherwise noted. An entire commercial or industrial building may be eligible for a rebate if it was unused for at least 90 consecutive days and satisfies the condition of the application. We do also allow for partial vacancy rebates. The current vacancy rebate for for vacant units assessed as occupied, so we're not talking right now about the vacant subclass of land, so land that's zoned commercial but doesn't currently have anything built on it. We're just talking about those occupied constructed buildings that have vacancies within them, and those rates are 30% for commercial and 35% for industrial properties. This slide just summarizes some of our vacant unit rebate statistics from the past 5 years. So when we issue rebates, we're issuing in the year following the year that the taxes were assessed. So you would apply in February of 2019 to have some of your 2018 taxes rebated, and that rebate would be processed and paid out of the 2019 budget. So in the tax year 2014, paid in 2015, we had 93 applications, approximately $100,000, and then you can see what those different years were going forward. 2018, we're estimating, we don't have all of those fully accounted for just yet, and they will be paid out or determined in time for the final tax bills that would go out in June. So in 2017, the previous provincial government, and that is one disclaimer that we've tried to make clear as we move through this process all along. This invitation came through our Liberal government. There has been no comments from our current government as to whether or not they're still going to accept and approve these applications as they come forward. We haven't heard anything to the contrary, and therefore we're moving forward with the expectation that they will, but that is to be announced. There really isn't, I would say, a huge impact from the province's perspective, as it doesn't really impact their revenue. It's for the municipal portion, although there would be that little bit of education. But at this point, we're not certain what the provincial government is going to do. So basically, municipalities were giving some leeway to consider changes in respect of the percentage reductions for vacant and excess land, percentage or percentages used for the vacant unit rebates, administrative policies, application procedures, and information requests, refining eligibility requirements, and so forward. Or ultimately to eliminate the program if that is what the municipality intended. The timeline to get to where we are today, there was an initial staff report provided to Corporate Services Committee just highlighting the nature of the provincial invitation that came forward in March of 2017. In July of 2018, upon Council's request, Peter Fries from MTE attended Corporate Services to highlight the changes and options available under the vacant unit rebate program. And at that time, a resolution was carried in that meeting and again through Council when those minutes came forward, that in consideration of the presentation by Peter Fries, the Corporate Services Committee recommended that Council receive the presentation and direct staff to bring forward further reports detailing the next steps they would have to undertake to submit an application to the province in 2019. And to be clear, if we submitted an application this year, our hope would be that it would be approved for 2019 taxes, in which case the rebates that we would otherwise issue in 2020 would be what is impacted. That report came forward on September 2018, and in consideration of that report, Council directed staff to proceed with the suggested model to engage stakeholders and seek community input, and that Council directed staff to report back to Council directly, which is what we are doing tonight with the final recommendation on this matter, which would be further informed by the engagement efforts. We brought forward the draft survey in December, and tonight we are discussing those results as well as looking for direction from Council as to whether or not we will be moving forward with an application. So the survey, in the end, we waited till after the Christmas holidays and everything in order for the survey to go live. So we didn't actually end up going live with the survey until January 7th. The survey was live for 6 weeks. We publicized the survey by emailing it to some of our direct stakeholders, as well as a Facebook ad campaign that was actually very successful. We had about 6,500 people respond or interact with that Facebook campaign. One thing to highlight is this process was not intended to be a consultation, but rather an opportunity to seek feedback as required by the provincial invitation. And the survey was widely distributed. There was an overwhelming response, and I have it on my phone here, the comments from MTE. Overall, the response rate to the survey, in their experience, was quite high. Out of all the surveys MTE had conducted, the city received the most by a significant margin. In addition to the high response rate, more than half the respondents also provided additional written comments, many of which were quite extensive. This response rate, combined with the makeup of the survey, makes it very clear that this topic is of significant interest to local residents and businesses. Considering the fact that the majority of respondents are residential owners who do not have a direct interest in commercial or industrial property tax matters, it is not surprising that there is overwhelming support to eliminate the program. That said, there is strong support for elimination from the business community as well, with double the number of business respondents supporting elimination compared to those that think it should continue. So in total, we had 159 valid responses. A few were deemed invalid. I guess there was a checkbox that you had to confirm that you had only submitted the survey one time. So we were looking for feedback from each resident, not necessarily from each property. So if someone owned more than one property, they were still only entitled to respond to the survey a single time. Of those 159 responses, 91% supported elimination. 6.3% opposed elimination, and 2.5% had no preference. And of the 159 responses, only 8% anticipated that there would be a negative aspect to any group, I would say, as a result of eliminating the program. So some of the alternatives to complete elimination that council may want to consider, and I'll just sort of summarize what some other municipalities have done. There's the option to continue with the vacant unit program status quo. So this would be where we don't make any changes and we continue to move on as we have since 2001. To modify the existing program but continue to offer rebates. So from what MTE has reported, other municipalities, by far most municipalities that are looking at this are electing to eliminate the program altogether. However, of the subset that choose not to, the next most popular option is to move forward and just to eliminate partial vacancies. So this would only allow properties with that full vacancy to apply, and it would also alleviate some of the resources required from staff time in order to evaluate and assess a partial vacant rebate application. The second most common change is a declining benefit on a property-specific basis. This may offer some relief for business owners with temporary vacancies. However, it does become extremely difficult to administer, especially if you have properties that are coming in and out of the program. And it would be highly manual and open to human error and differences in interpretation. So that option is not recommended, the declining benefit option. Phasing out through a fixed period, for example, we could reduce that 30% rebate percentage over a period of time to allow for just that transition. The municipalities that have undertaken this approach have often done so, however, over a very short timeline. So making it 15% the first year and 0% the second year. And then finally, the option that we were exploring was to eliminate the program altogether upon provincial approval. This slide sort of just shows the impact of elimination. So for illustration, although it would be felt in 2020, if we were to see it in our 2019 budget, it would add back $132,000 in expenses, reducing our combined increase to what council approved at 2.51 down to 2.19%, and it would reduce the total taxes paid by every household or the average household by $11.36. I've then taken three, what I'll call typical properties. These are actual properties, but just to give you an idea. So we have a downtown property that, and this was based on last year's application, that applied for the rebate for the commercial portion of their building. And as you can see, there's some residential there as well. So the total taxes paid would be just under $7,000, and that property received a rebate of just under $2,000. The next item is a commercial plaza, so this is outside of the downtown, a fully commercial property, and it demonstrates sort of how the partial vacancy rebate works. So there's a portion of that property that is vacant, and that part is assessed. So on total taxes of $45,000 or just over $45,000, that property received a rebate of $3,700. And then the last item is an industrial property. There's actually not very many industrial properties that are receiving this vacancy rebate. Mostly what we see is commercial properties that benefit from the program. However, in this case, we have an industrial property with a partial vacancy, total taxes of $75,000 and a rebate of just over $7,500. So the next steps, there is a staff report that I have to present following this. I won't spend a lot of time on it, but this slide just highlights the motion or the recommended motion that MTE has suggested that would meet the provincial requirements in order to move forward with an application. And if you don't mind just putting it on page 3 of that staff report, I'll take questions from back at my desk or leave it to you. Thank you.
So have we got it there now? Oops. Okay, so Councillor Gregg?
Thanks, Mayor By. My first question is, a year and a half from now, after Tenneco has shut down their facility, the way the current program is, could they then apply through the vacant unit program and ask for tax relief, thereby being subsidized in their taxes by the residents of Owen Sound who they're no longer employing?
If the building is fully vacant and not in any sort of productive use, there are some requirements as to whether or not it needs to be available for sale or for rent. But yes, if that were the case, then they would be eligible for that rebate.
Others? Go ahead.
Through your worship, you've mentioned staff time, and I think in the earlier presentation there was mention of admin time. Can we get some idea on what it would save from staff time perspective if this program did not continue?
I guess it's part of the overall workload that's undertaken by our tax collection department. There's certainly the process of receiving the applications, submitting those applications to MPAC for approval, and then processing them individually on every tax account. I'll be honest, I don't have the actual stats on how much time that takes, but on 97 applications, if you're spending a couple hours on each one, you could prorate that.
Perhaps the easiest way to put it, Your Worship, may be that there would be no staff adjustments whether this program continues or doesn't continue. Our staff would stay here. They have lots of work, whether it's this work or other work, but it would be in the hundreds of hours a year for somebody.
Go ahead.
Through your worship, and I wasn't implying that staff would be reduced. It would just be helpful to have a dollar figure on what it takes for city staff to support this program.
It would certainly be in several hundred hours a year, absolutely, without a doubt.
Others? Go ahead, Brock.
There was a lot of talk about the potential for appeals to the tax assessment, and I'm just wondering what is the likelihood that any changes to those tax assessments would exceed the $135,000 in savings? If you can even answer that question, I don't know.
I don't think I could answer that question. I'm not an assessor. Or one thing we do see, and there's sort of the intention of the program to provide some relief to those property owners that have temporary vacancies. The other side is for those more longer-term or chronic vacancies or properties that remain vacant for a long period of time. Those vacancies are being captured in the property's ability to earn income and ultimately captured in the assessed value of that property. So that's where we see sort of that double dipping. Those properties can apply for assessment changes whether this program exists or not. So we may remove that one element of the potential to double dip, but it wouldn't stop them from still having that appeal on the assessed value of their property. Would the additional expense, however, of that 1/3 taxes create additional ARB appeals? I wouldn't think that it's material myself in order to do that, but again, I'm not a property assessor, I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Councillor Kepke?
Thank you. You had a chart up there on the numbers of vacancy rebates that were issued over the years, and some of them were denied. Can you give me examples of the reasons they were denied, and who makes that determination?
Currently, MPAC assesses the validity of our appeals. In most cases, I believe they were denied because they didn't meet the eligibility under the program. So they either weren't vacant in the right time frame or something along those lines, but basically they weren't eligible.
Your worship, from times when we used to check them ourselves, they have to be completely vacant, and if it's part of the building, I'm going to say hoarded off from the rest. We quite often would find they were using the property for storage. You're not allowed for the vacancy. Those are typical examples that we have found.
Okay. Councillor Thomas?
Thanks, Your Worship. Well, I was on Corporate Services when all this first began, my brief stint on that committee, and, you know, I was completely in favor of reducing this at that time. Seeing this report, I'm still in favor, I think. However, I guess that where my brain is going now is, you know, we're just coming up to a time in our downtown of intense disruption. We know the River Precinct is going ahead. We know the 10th Street Bridge is going ahead. The next 2 years are going to be chaotic and difficult at best for everyone in the downtown. Now, no one knows better than me that it's getting tougher and tougher to make a buck when you're self-employed and when you employ other people. And I think that we've talked a lot around this table about what we're going to do for our downtown to help mitigate the disruption of the next 2 years of construction. So while I still am in favor of this, I would just question the timing of bringing it forward. And I would like to make a motion to postpone until the construction of the 10th Street Bridge is finished. And if Dennis wants to put a date on that for us, I would gladly accept it.
So, motion made. It's on the table, okay? Councillor Gregg?
It's a motion to postpone, so I can't speak to anything other than the date of postponement.
Good point. Anyone else wish to speak to the motion?
Same idea, Your Worship. The program isn't to be in effect until, well, January 2019, but wouldn't affect till 2020. So a delay in a year, in my mind, would be okay.
Okay, I'm going to call the question. So the motion is to delay until the end of 10th Street Bridge is reopened. Councillor Gregg?
Recorded vote, please.
So it's going to be recorded votes. I'm calling the question. Go ahead, Ms. Bloomfield.
Councillor Dodd?
Not in favor?
Councillor Gregg?
Opposed?
Councillor Hanley?
Not in favor.
Councillor Kepke?
In favor.
Councillor Merton?
In favor.
Councillor Thomas?
In favor?
Deputy Mayor O'Leary?
In favor.
Mayor Body?
In favor.
Motion is carried with 5 in favor and 3 opposed.
There we go. Thank you, Ms. Allen, for the report and all the work to this point. I have to dust it off in a couple of years. Diana, do we need a motion to receive the report as well? No. If we do, that would put it on the record, and then it would be there, though? Postponed it. Okay, so it's there. Good, thanks. 12C, report on cannabis policy.
Thank you, Worship. In December 2018, this council made a decision to notify the Register of Ontario that the city would opt in and allow the AGCO to license retail cannabis stores in Owen Sound. In January, you considered a draft policy and asked staff to engage public feedback on the draft. So just to recap, the purpose of the policy is really to set out locally sensitive uses where the city would want consideration by the AGCO if they were licensing retail stores. It would provide a framework for the municipality to provide the AGCO with comments within the commenting window, as well as act as a tool for individuals and businesses who are looking for locations to site a store in Owen Sound. So the draft policy includes a red map, which is everywhere a retail store would be permitted. The blue map, as mandated by the province, are schools plus a 150-meter buffer. The yellow is really what is under discussion, and those are what we're calling locally sensitive uses. Those include daycares, churches, drinking establishments, addiction treatment facilities, beer and liquor stores, as well as group homes. Staff developed a plan to engage the public, and we received 51 responses to our survey. Unfortunately, the day of the open house, we had a winter weather day here, and we didn't have anyone attend the afternoon session while the buses were still running, and we were forced to cancel the evening session. We did, however, have 51 responses to the survey, and 82% suggested that the policy identified appropriately the sensitive land uses. We did receive some other suggestions through the survey. They asked us to include a child care facility at 1717 2nd Avenue East, which is the BDO building, that we would include the Kiwanis Soccer Complex, add 4 long-term care facilities, the Family Health Team, and Graybruce Health Services. The report states that there is a daycare at 1717, and I've confirmed today, in fact, that there's not. I think it's a speech pathology and not a daycare building, so we would eliminate that building because it doesn't include a daycare. The Kiwanis Soccer Complex, as Council's aware, is out in the northeast section of the city, and it's 285 meters from one parcel where retail would be permitted and 482 meters from another. We haven't included any other playing fields, and I guess the point really is to say, even if there were retail in those areas that are closest to it, it would be well beyond what would be considered an appropriate separation to those uses. So the draft policy, as it's presented, doesn't include the soccer complex. We have included the hospital and family health team because those are locations where individuals would be seeking treatment for addictions. Lastly, the long-term care facilities were not included because staff were finding it hard to rationalize how the facilities would meet the public interest test of the provincial criteria. So with that, Your Worship, the recommendation is that you would direct staff to bring forward a bylaw to amend the delegation of powers and duties bylaw to designate the city clerk and/or myself the authority to provide municipal comments on cannabis retail stores, and that you would direct staff to bring forward a bylaw to adopt the municipal cannabis policy statement.
Councillor Kepke?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would move the recommendation and appreciate all the due diligence and work that staff have gone into investigating all of this for us.
So other questions, concerns? Oh, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm probably too late to bring this up, but I just wanted to ask, like I understand schools, daycare facilities, healthcare facilities, churches as sensitive areas. Why the beer store and the liquor store? Did we make that decision, or is that the government, or where did that come from?
Through Your Worship, it's a good question. The government did not, the government has mandated no sales within 150 meters of school. That was something that staff had recommended. When we think of it in terms of the public interest as it's defined, I think really my thinking in suggesting those was that maybe you don't want to cluster these uses with beer and alcohol sales, notwithstanding that, you know, the original proposal, I think, from the provincial government was that actually the sales were going to be done in stores, in LCBO stores. So, you know, it really is up to council. One thing that I would note is that the city in
Excuse me, I'm going to go to the media table. Can you keep quiet, please? You're interrupting. Thank you.
The city will benefit from having the time where we can experience and learn from municipalities that have early licenses, because we are in that group that won't receive a license for a retail store until later. So I do think this at least gets us a start, but it is a policy as the landscape changes around us, as there's new schools, daycares, it will be a policy that we'll have to be diligent about modifying.
Okay, thanks.
That raise other questions? Seeing none, so Councillor Kepke moved the recommendation. All in favor? That is carried. 12D. Ms. Allen, I think purchasing with regard to 10th Street Bridge, or is it?
Through your worship, thank you. This staff report was prepared seeking a recommendation of about $210,000 to be added to an existing change order for the design and construction of the 10th Street Bridge. The change order would involve a task associated with demolition of the Gaveris building, which requires a bit more care, given that we'll only be demolishing half the building. So a structural assessment has to be done of that building, as well as a environmental audit, which has already been completed. And part of this work will also entail the traffic control and detour development as incorporated as part of the project. Even with the change order that we're seeking tonight, the total engineering cost would be approximately $1.23 million, which is well within, well, not well, it's within the budget of $1.28 million.
Okay. Councillor Gregg?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Body. I would note, as the funding is going to be provided from the 10th Street Bridge replacement and the 10th Street corridor traffic signal control, and the project budget remains on at $7.6 million, I will move the recommendation.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Wright. Sorry, isn't that interesting? Oh, Larry? 3 months later.
We should never forget her.
Well, obviously, I haven't.
Thank you, through your worship, to Director of Public Works and Engineering. Dennis, the recommendation includes temporary traffic planning and detour implementation. Will there be public meetings as well as approvals through the Operations Committee and the DIA?
Through your worship, yes, that's the plan, is actually hopefully within next month's meeting or the month after for sure, to bring it forward to the Operations Committee. And once we get approval through the Operations Committee, bring it to the DIA for consideration.
Great, thank you.
No other comments? All in favor? That is carried. 12E, also purchasing with regard to water main.
Through your worship, woohoo! Sorry. It came within budget, or actually underneath budget, so it's the first major project that closed. It'll allow us to, we're looking at about the overall, be within the overall budget by $100,000. So I guess our well-laid plans have actually worked out. We made an effort to get this project out early to the bidders, and the submissions came in, and McDonnell has been a successful bidder and well within the budget that we expected to use on this specific project.
Councillor Gregg?
Well, last fall, I was on operations, and we had intended to have the 900 block of 3rd Avenue done last fall, and some of the early pricing indicated that it was coming in way too high for the season. So this has worked out favorably, coupling it with the 2nd Avenue block as well. So I will gladly move the recommendation.
Okay. Other discussion, questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. 12F.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a report to recommend that Council directs staff to bring forward a bylaw authorizing the mayor and clerk to execute an agreement with the Ministry of Community Safety and Correctional Services. The court security and prisoner transportation is an upload program, and it provides some funding to offset the costs of that service that the city takes on. In the past, we have had multi-year agreements. With the change in government, there was some question as to whether or not this program would continue. It is continuing, however, and this agreement is only covering 1 year, and that would be 2019. So we don't know how this program is expected to continue beyond this year. However, we are seeing an increase in our total funding to approximately $450,000. The agreement also requires that we provide a proof of insurance and we complete our annual financial report. But really, this is just looking for that authority to sign the agreement with the ministry.
Councillor Dodd?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd be more than happy to move the recommendation.
Councillor Gregg?
I do just have a couple questions on it. My first question is, this is considerably more than the previous year, but we have seen these slight leaps incrementally over the last few years. When did we find out about the increase in dollars, and is it coinciding with an increase in costs that are being forced upon us, or is this really good news and this is an injection of more funds provincially, which should be able to be offset by the local taxpayer?
Through Your Worship, my understanding, this is not an injection of more funds. There is a total envelope of funds that go towards the court security and prisoner transport. It's then allocated to the participating municipalities based on their share of the total costs in the province. The reason why we are seeing an increase is because the funds are based on a financial return, so there's sort of a 2-year lag. So 2 years ago, we did see increasing costs related to court security and prisoner transport, and that's now being reflected in our current year grant. Since then, our costs have actually come down a little bit, so if this program does continue, depending on what happens in the rest of the province, I would expect it to possibly come down. It's difficult to say at this point what the ongoing future years of this program will be.
So the 19 police budget would incorporate this increase in funds, or it may not?
We did adjust the total funding in the police budget up from the prior year amount to $420,000. So we didn't recognize the full increase, knowing that it wasn't necessarily sustainable, but we did increase to reflect most of it.
Thank you.
Ms. Allen, off the top of your head, and I'm sandbagging you, so you may not have the answer. Do we know what percentage of the actual court security costs and transportation this covers? Like, it isn't 100% of our costs.
No, there's certainly still a net cost to providing that service. And I would say, off the top of my head, it's close to $300,000 a year, net cost.
Thanks. Councillor Gregg, did you moved it? No, Councillor Dodd moved it, so all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. We're down to 12G. Ms. Coulter, with regard to, I think it's you.
Own Sound Waste Watchers. So this group has made a request to council to allow them to collect waste on Saturday, April 20th this spring. So last year they had an event. It was rather informal, and this year they're hoping to grow it a little bit. It happens to occur on the same day that the Sydenham Sportsmen run a pickup or collection along the river area in the downtown. So they're seeking permission from the city to work in the harbor area. Miller Waste would be providing them with disposal bins, and they would also be hauling away the waste and recycling to Miller Waste for the group at no cost. Following this, there would be a talking trash social from 4 till 6 at the Frog Pond. I think the group has a future deputation plan to council, but your commitment would be garbage bags, gloves, and the group would sign waivers, and they would also receive the SOP in terms of how to handle sharps. So the recommendation, Your Worship, is that that you approve their request for the East Harbor pickup on Saturday, April 20th, and you recommend staff provide appropriate waivers and supplies for the volunteers.
Thank you. Councillor Koepke?
I'm happy to move that recommendation.
Any questions from anyone else? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Consent agenda.
Through your worship, on the consent agenda this evening is minutes for receipt from the DIA Board, the Police Board, and the Great Sauble Conservation Authority. And there is correspondence which is presented for the information of council. Full listing is available at 13D.
Moved by myself that City Council receive items 13A to D and on the consent agenda dated March 4, 2019.
All in favor? That is carried. If we can go back up to 13A, there's a report from the DIA, two reports, February 13th and March 6th.
Thank you, Worship. February 13 minutes of the DIA meeting. I'll just highlight a few things in those minutes. The annual general meeting of the DIA will be taking place March 21st at 6 p.m. in the council chambers here. And the office, effective March 31st, has been given up in the downtown, and all DIA issues will be coming to City Hall. And there was a review and discussion regarding the 2019 events, and there was a great presentation by staff on those events. The March 6 minutes dealt with implementation of the downtown improvement area and city-sponsored parking. And in those, there were recommendations with the hour limit for short and long-term parking, the 900 block of First Avenue West, fines, enforcement time each day, passes and costs, revenue from passes, wording of decals, and City Hall employees parking. Monthly passes, there was a motion made that monthly passes would change to be a fee of $30, and after the 15th of the month, they would be $20. There were some issues of loading and unloading zones on 2nd Avenue in various blocks, so there was a request that the Operations Committee review those and provide a report back to the DIA Board. There was some discussion on signage and the wording of the decals, and the signage that will be placed on the parking meters will be two-hour free parking is courtesy of your local downtown merchants and the City of Owen Sound. Like more time, you can park for 5 hours in the lots. Enjoy your visit to downtown Owen Sound. And on the 5-hour meters, it will be 5-hour free parking in this lot is courtesy of your local downtown merchants and the City of Owen Sound. Enjoy your visit to downtown Owen Sound. So under the parking complimentary system, enforcement will end each day at 5 p.m. And then recommendations that were made also were that council's being requested to follow in terms of the complimentary parking downtown. To designate long-term parking will be a maximum of 5 hours in the lots. Designated long-term parking is to be included in all municipal parking lots, as well as the 900 block of First Avenue West. All other parking downtown will be a maximum of 2 hours. Fines for parking beyond the designated time limit will be $10 if paid within 14 days, $20 after 14 days. Enforcement times will be 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday to Friday. Net revenue from the sale of parking passes will be divided 50% each between the DIA and the city, and City Hall employees will receive parking passes for long-term lots and be requested to park in the 700 block of First Avenue East in the 2 municipal lots. So that's a request that, with approving these minutes, council will be approving that as well.
Any other questions? Mr. Ritchie, with the fines, 50% coming to the city, 50% going to the DIA, is that basically, no? Parking passes, sorry, passes, not fines. Is that basically still going to snow removal and maintenance? Like basically all the revenue now that comes in goes to parking. Is that still the idea, even though it's coming into?
Well, Your Worship, certainly the DIA's budget will be, once we're fully functional, $180,000 to parking, and if they get some money back through fines, it will be less. The city has a budget of about $60,000 devoted to parking, and if we get money through fines, it will be less. So it will, in one way or another, all remain in the parking system. That's correct.
Okay, good, thank you. Thank you. Next was minutes of Great Sauble Conservation. No, I skipped one, didn't I? Owen Sound Police Services Board, sorry, from January 21st.
Thank you, Worship. This was the January 21st meeting that just happened to be the first day on the job for Chief Ambrose. Prior to the start of the meeting, we had a swearing-in ceremony for the chief. I thought Inspector Jeff Flooney's comments were worth repeating. He wanted to thank the board on behalf of all members of the service for selecting such a great candidate, which sounds cliche, but I spoke to Inspector Flooney since then, and he explained that a few of the members do know the chief, but they all know of his good reputation. Of course, we didn't know that going through the hiring process, but as it turns out, we're off to a real good start with our new police chief. In addition to that, the board's elected Garth Pierce as chair of the police board for the next year. Chair Pierce welcomed Chief Ambrose on his first day, and also welcomed Councillor Kepke and Community Representative John Thompson to the board, who were both in attendance. Both John and Councillor Kepke had their first board meeting on February 27th. On a personal note, I'd like to thank Chief Sornberger, Garth Pierce, Inspectors Jeff Flooney and Mike Daze, as well as Kelly Jo Crampine, for making my 4 years on the police board both educational and rewarding. Thank you, Worship.
Questions? Seeing none, thank you. Now to 13C, back to Marion, I think, for Gray Sobel. Sorry. Councilor Greg.
You'll be going to Marion in the future, as she was elected the vice chair for Gray Sobel Conservation Authority at the last meeting, that being, I guess, the February meeting held in March. But as this is still the January meeting, most of the attention was on the budget. The budget, as you saw, was put forward for recommendation and approval through the corporate services minutes, which we'll be speaking about later. The budget includes an overall increase of 3.97% of the municipal levy component, which is approximately 42% of the Conservation Authority revenues. Other revenues are the small amount that we get from the province. It has an increase since about 1995, and parking fees and permitting and so forth. The changes in the modified current value assessment mean that the increase to Owen Sound is slightly less than the total increase, which was 3.97. The change to Owen Sound is 3.30%, or $8,000 and $8,380 total dollars in municipal levy contribution. The budget looks to execute in the 2018 strategic plan, and these are the focal areas: enhancing monitoring and management of flood risks, higher investment in capital assets, including the admin center. It's worth mentioning that building has not had significant investment in it for a very long time. Mayor Boddy, you were at the last meeting and saw firsthand that it is in need of some significant investment, even just to meet the requirements of the accessibility changes coming in the near future. So that's a big part of the capital investment in the budget, as well as development of watershed plans with municipalities and strengthening the environmental education and communication. There was note from other board members last year that it was all really centered right around the Arboretum and really a benefit to Owen Sound or very local residents to Owen Sound. So the Conservation Authority is looking to expand their resources through it to benefit the whole authority. So that's pretty much the takeaway from the January meeting.
Okay. Questions? Seeing none, thank you. Committee minutes, number 14, minutes from Corporate Services, February 28th, 2019.
And I will mention here that I'll bring these minutes forward. We put off the election of the chair. There's some not in attendance that night, so that election will be held at the next meeting, that being later in March. We had a deputation from Mr. Ron DeBoer on parking in front of his business on the 900 block 2nd Avenue East. He's got no loading zone, no back entrance to service his building. The committee asked for a report back at the next meeting, and that would have further information resulting from the DIA meeting, which was to be held the next week, I think it was. But ultimately, that plan will go through operations, but we'll have a report come back next month. Committee recommended approval of the 2019 Conservation Authority budget as presented. The committee also recommended authorizing the funding agreement with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities for the staffing grant, which is an approximate value of $117,000 over 2 years. This position was originally going to be a Conservation Authority position. However, the fine print on the grant meant that it had to be a staff individual of the municipality. So this is a bit of just a change in the the funding grant or the staffing grant. It's going to be used to increase GIS land use modeling, stormwater, hazard slopes are some of the easy ones to think about there. It'll have as an objective a climate adoption plan, research paper on how climate change can be incorporated into policy and decision making, creation of sustainability and environmental goals, and an update to the city and the Conservation Authority on infrastructure processes, ensuring new developments and assets are included in digital elevation modeling, which is the DEM that you read about, and the GIS modeling. All this information can also be incorporated into a future stormwater management plan if the city undertakes such a thing in the future. So that was recommended. We receive for information the monthly additional year-end time, additionally the year-end time management report for fire services. And it's worth mentioning that we've had lots of discussion about the overtime hours, but at the end of the year, we had 25 fire calls with a loss. In 2017, we had 26. The value of these losses was approximately $450,000. In 2017, it was $760,000. Vehicle fire losses were $67,000, and in 2017 it was $18,000. So, you know, out there is the occasional vehicle catching on fire. And emergency response calls for 2018, 809. 2017 was 908. So committee received that for information. We also had an informative report on our taxes receivable. These are reported annually to the province through the financial information return. You've heard that that term earlier tonight. If you really want to delve into some good reading, that's deep reading. If load up the financial information returns across the province on a quiet night. So, and you'll find it in there. Yeah. But in that financial information return, they derive a provincial standard of taxes between 10 and 15%, taxes receivable between 10 and 15% being a moderate risk, of the annual levy as being a moderate risk to the municipality. For financial health, below 10% is considered low, and as of December 31st, taxes receivable was 5.13%. So this is a funny figure where it can impact our budget positively. However, when it does so, it's maybe not all positive news when your budget increases because more people are not able to pay their taxes on time. So we had a biannual report received for information on the tenders between $50,000 and $250,000. Received for information, no comment. And coming forward was our annual holiday season closing. This is looking at the Christmas season for 2019. Committee supports the option of closing from December 25th to December 27th inclusive and Wednesday, January 1st, and to close at noon on the 24th. Staff will be required to use 1 day of vacation lieu time to cover the 27th. This is pretty similar to last year. 24th, we were open till 4:30 last year, and it was very quiet. I think garbage bag tags are an excellent Christmas gift idea for people, but it's clear that people are buying them at the grocery store, at our retail partners, and not coming to City Hall to purchase them on Christmas Eve. So the committee recommends closing at noon on the 24th. We receive for information the annual update to the records and information policy. This is a very lengthy document that we have to maintain every year. And I think kudos should go to Desiree for her work that goes into that, because it's a long, long document and a lot of work to maintain. And this is stuff that's, you know, your shredding processes and information retention and so forth. We received for information an update to the position of Deputy Clerk. This role will include more time administering the DIA board meetings as well as the Committee of Adjustment meetings. And committee recommends executing a renewal ATV access agreement with the South Bruce Peninsula ATV Club. I think back to when we first were looking at ATVs on our streets, and I think that was the worst vote I ever cast in the first 4 years, was voting against it because the county didn't get on side, and I thought we were going to have relentless ATVs going down 4th Avenue West, and it totally didn't happen. So the city has had that agreement in place, and this is an extension that the committee is recommending. So with that, I would ask for approval of those minutes.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. 14B, Councillor Thomas.
Thanks, Your Worship. It was really not a very long meeting of the Tom Thompson Advisory Committee. A lot of time spent dealing with our subcommittees, which we're starting to receive volunteers for. We're still looking for more volunteers. If anyone within the sound of my voice would like to volunteer, please consider it. I guess the one thing that I will point out, we often talk about the Tom Thompson around the table here and around the community and what a great gem it is and how important it is to the community. And I just wanted to share a story. We reached out to Lord Cultural Associates, which is one of the preeminent cultural organizations in the world. They work from Toronto, but they're all over the world developing museums and galleries. And they had a number of years ago done a visioning session for the board of the Tom Thompson Gallery at a cost of $10,000 for the one-day visioning session. And we got talking about the need to do a visioning session because the board very much now has sort of made it through that first 18 months that were difficult, and we were relearning how everything was going to work, and now it's time to start planning for the future. And so when we reached out to Lord & Associates, they offered to do a one-day visioning session for $1,000 in expenses. And that, to me, the comment that came from Lord & Associates was, this gallery is so important, and they have such a soft spot in their hearts down there for it, that they really wanted to see it get the best foot moving forward. So, that to me really says a lot about the gallery and its staff and the value of the collection that we've got over there at the Tom Thompson. So, with that, I would move approval of these minutes.
Questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Go ahead.
I wonder if we could bring back onto the agenda the report that we used to receive from the Deputy Mayor regarding the county initiatives.
Oh, that's...
Could we, next agenda, put that back on? Thanks.
Yep. Forgot all about that. Good thinking. Thank you. At 15 on this, we have no postponed matters. At 16, we have no motions for which notice was previously given. Additional business, Mr. Ritchie.
Thank you, Your Worship. At our last meeting, Councillor Gregg brought up the discussion about mischief calls, I guess, to 911. I did phone our police service who administer our 911 calls, and they told me the 911 call center does receive non-emergency calls. When this occurs, they try to educate the callers that the service is not meant for those calls. If they receive repeated non-emergency 911 calls or calls that are mischief in nature, the callers can be charged and convicted, and they have done that on occasion in the past and will continue to do so.
Thank you. Councillor Dodd.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just want to give a brief, I guess, announcement for the next Young Professionals Network meeting that's happening on March 27th. That is next Wednesday. It's the 4th event we've had. This one's going to be at the Thornbury Village Craft Cider and Beer. This is the first one that we're going to have in the town of Blue Mountains. We've had one in Meaford, and we've had two in Owen Sound. So as of March 14th, we had 104 tickets sold of 140. So as we're starting to see, I think with this fourth event, we had really good success from our last three events. And this one's obviously off to another great start. So that's at Thornbury Village Craft Cider and Beer. If you want to go to this, you have to go onto the Made in Grey Facebook page. It's an Eventbrite sign-in. Now, this is a under 40-ish event, so there's a few of us that could come, but not everyone. So it's a free event. There's there's appetizers, live music, and then there's going to be obviously some a cash bar for cider. So once again, this is an event that is really aimed at networking young individuals. They don't necessarily need to be professional. They could be just finishing university. They could just be finishing college. They could just be coming out of high school and looking to network with individuals that have shared interests. And this is a great opportunity, and we've seen some of the great successes from the past 3 events. We've met individuals who've moved up from Brooklyn, New York, to start a business here in the industrial park of Owen Sound. We've met individuals who are coming up from down by Flesherton in Maxwell area, where he moved up from Toronto, and he's now running a restaurant, and he's making connections with the local farming community to use local products. It's interesting to see how many people are expanding and are coming to these events that aren't from Owen Sound or the Grey County region originally. They're individuals who have moved to the region and that are coming out to meet some new people and share their stories. And it's one of those events that you leave from and you almost have goosebumps leaving because of how it's inspiring to see other young-minded individuals who are, really working with each other of trying to better our county as a whole. So once again, that's on March 27th. It's a Wednesday, which is a change from our normal dates. Maiden Grey on the Facebook page, Thornbury Village Craft and Cider, 6:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you. Ish.
Ish.
Ish. Some of us around the table wish we were ish. Okay, thank you. Motion, committee rise.
Move that the Committee of the Whole rise and report.
All in favor? That is carried. Back into formal session. Motion to adopt.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Thomas, that the action taken in Committee of the Whole in considering public meetings, deputations and presentations, public question period, matters arising from correspondence, reports from city staff, consent agenda, committee minutes, matters postponed, motions for which notice was previously given, and additional business be confirmed by this council.
All in favor? That is carried. Notices of motion, if any, seeing none. Bylaws, Ms. Bloomfield.
Through your worship, the bylaws listed for approval on tonight's agenda include the confirmatory bylaw, a bylaw to execute an Ontario transfer payment agreement with the Minister of Community Safety and Correctional Services for the Court Security and Prisoner Transportation Program, a bylaw to execute a facility use agreement with RMP Athletic Locker for a vendor show at the Rec Center, 2 bylaws to execute agreements for an extension of time for payment of development charges, one with 249542 on Ontario Inc. and one with Barry's Construction and Installation. Bylaw to execute an amending agreement number 1 to the Public Transit Infrastructure Fund Phase 1 transfer payment agreement with the Minister of Transportation. A bylaw to execute a loan agreement with the Owen Sound Housing Company respecting construction financing. A bylaw to execute an agreement with 2523054 Ontario Inc. respecting a conditional building permit. And a bylaw to adopt the estimates for the sums required during the year 2019 for the general and capital purposes for Owen Sound.
Good, thank you. Oops, yep.
As I'm not voting on 21C, can it be voted on separate?
Or we just vote on all of them, except it's noted that you're not voting on that you've declared pecuniary interest. Yeah, go ahead.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Thomas, that bylaw numbers 2019-041, 042, 043, 044, 045, 046, 047, 048, and 049 be passed and enacted.
All in favor? That is carried. It is now 9:03. That completes our business for tonight, so we're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.